conscious collective principle, socialism, and will have no need to make any further intrusion in the affairs of man. Men have so dastardly distorted what my spirit is that it was necessary for me to come upon the scene, and I have. I shall show you from time to time proofs of that, so that you will have no further need of religion, because the highest authority tells you that you have no further need of it. I've come doing all the things you ever imagined God to do and have never seen done. You have never seen anyone resurrected before your eyes, and yet you have seen me do it repeatedly.
They're extremely dangerous. Extremely dangerous, aren't they? And I think you can sense the hands of these people that we are non-violent people, but we're extremely dangerous. Because we've been fed up with anarchy and fed up with rebellion and fed up with selfishness.
Die, Willie?
No, I don't, Ted, but I'm not afraid to.
What's that?
I don't want to die, but I ain't afraid to.
Well, then go ahead and die.
I don't want to.
Huh?
I don't want to.
Put your hand here, big chump. Hold it. Let's take it through. Let the son of a bitch jump out.
Don't let it. Dad,
What about it?
Dad, you know, like I said, I don't want to. You know, I said that I was just pissed at the time. I mean, I didn't say it was your fault. You know, at first I tried to hold it against you that how come I didn't get off the crew, but I didn't feel it was your fault. I felt it was pinning them because they didn't give you the right.
Corn Scheller. And all these are our youngsters, you know. They're all happy. Look at Tommy. Go back to the States?
No.
No way. I can't get you to go back to the States?
No.
He says he won't go back. Obviously, that's the general attitude. And Kevin? Is it the pigs that he and David look at? Bananas. Oh, that's right. To get myself straight. Kevin Grubbs looks after the bananas. Do you want to go back to the States, Kevin?
Oh.
Can't get you to go back? What about you, Vincent? You've only been here a day. How do you feel about it?
No, I wouldn't want to go back.
How very much I've loved you. How very much I've tried my best to give you the good life.
The story of what happened at the Reverend Jim Jones's People's Temple Commune was always unbelievable. True, of course, but unbelievable. And today it became more so simply because the numbers got so much worse. Not 408 or 409 dead, as the Guyanese had said earlier, but at least 780, perhaps.
There are places in history that feel cursed, locations where human hope was twisted into tragedy. Jonestown, Guyana is one of those places. In 1978, over 900 men, women, and children died under the command of one person, a preacher, a civil rights activist, a cult leader. His name was Jim Jones. And this is the disturbing story of how a movement that once began as a promise of equality and faith slowly transformed into one of the darkest chapters in modern history. By the way, guys, you guys know what to do. If you're new to this channel, welcome. Welcome to Destructive Stories. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and with all that being said, let's get into today's episode. James Warren Jones was born on May 13, 1931 in Crete, Indiana, during the Great Depression. Jim was an only child to James Thurman Jones and Lynetta Putman, living in poverty and struggling to make ends meet. Jones also grew up in a dysfunctional home. His father, James, according to his autobiography, was an alcoholic and an apparent member of the Ku Klux Klan. His mother, Lynetta, apparently was the breadwinner of the home and would frequently get into violent fights with his father. He described that during the dysfunction, he befriended a neighbor of his who would invite him to a Baptist church in his neighborhood and talk to him about the Bible. Jim built a deep fascination for the Bible. It felt real to him. While other children played games, Jim preferred to spend his time reading the Bible, attending church services, and imitating preachers. He would gather neighborhood kids and conduct his own sermons, standing on makeshift pulpits and speaking with authority far beyond his age. Even then, people noticed something unsettling about the way he demanded attention and obedience. Jones also developed a strange fascination about death and reportedly would hold mock funerals for dead pets and animals and spoke frequently about heaven, hell, and the end of the world. These behaviors were not just childhood curiosity. They were revealed as an early obsession with control over life, death, and belief. By high school, Jones was already preaching in local churches and attending revival meetings across Indiana. He was captivated by the charismatic preachers who would command crowds with their voices alone. He studied their techniques carefully, the pauses, the gestures, and the emotional appeals that they would bring to the table. What he learned would later become the foundation of his own leadership style. At the same time, Jones became deeply troubled by racial inequality. He formed friendships with black classmates and spoke out against segregation, an uncommon stance in his community at the time. This gave him a sense of moral purpose and further fueled his belief that he was destined to lead others to a better world. During that period, he would also work part-time at a hospital as a medical assistant, where he would eventually meet his wife, Marceline Baldwin. At 21 years old, he was offered a pastoral position with his wife Marcy at Somerset Southside Church. The congregation had low attendance, but that wouldn't stop Jones, as it would be known that he would go door to door in the projects and invite residents, mostly African American, to Sunday service. However, even though the attendance would double in size where multiple services had to be held, Jones would be let go of his position due to racial inequality. This enraged Jim Jones, and he decided to start something of his own. In 1955, Jones founded his own church in Indianapolis. He called it the People's Temple. At first, the People's Temple appeared to be a force for good. However, Jones preached on racial inequality in a time when segregation still divided much of America. His church welcomed black families, white families, and those who had been rejected elsewhere. He opened up soup kitchens, helped the elderly, and created programs for people struggling with addiction and poverty. To many, Jim Jones looked like a hero. He spoke passionately about love, justice, and unity. He told his followers that they were a part of something special, a movement that would change the world, and people believed him. As the People's Temple began to grow, behind the scenes, Jones was shaping something far more controlling than a church. He encouraged members to confess their deepest fears and secrets in front of the congregation. These confessions were framed as spiritual healing, but they were also creating vulnerability. Jones now knew their weaknesses, their doubts, and their private struggles. Gradually, loyalty became more important than faith. Jones warned his followers that the outside world was dangerous, that racism, corruption, and violence would destroy them if they left the temple. He painted himself as the protector, the only one who truly cared for them. According to former members of the People's Temple, it was said that Jim would hold crusades where fake miracles would be done, with members pretending to have a chronic illness. Families who questioned Jones were labeled as enemies. Critics were accused of trying to tear the church apart. Leaving the temple was described not as a choice, but as an actual betrayal. Even some members who described leaving the church reported being stalked by other members of the People's Temple. As for the high majority of members who would choose to stay, loyalty would again be challenged. The church was no longer something that the people just attended. It became their entire life. Many were actually called to give up their life savings. Some gave up their homes. Others were even forced to cut ties with relatives who disagreed with the movement. Jones's charisma played a key role in the transformation. He could speak gently one moment and thunderously the next. He would weep with his followers and demand obedience in the same breath. He made people feel seen, valued, and chosen. Members of the People's Temple began calling him Dad or Father. He claimed that he had supernatural insight. He spoke as if he alone understood the truth about the world. Over time, the sermons were focused less on God and Jesus and more on Jones himself. The People's Temple eventually would relocate to California in the 1960s, first to Ukiah and later to San Francisco. Jones convinced his members that he had a prophetic dream and that an apocalypse was coming to Northern America, and California was going to be the only state that was spared. Just like that, almost all of his congregation followed him to California. There, it grew even faster. Thousands attended his services. Politicians praised Jones for his work. However, behind the scenes, the abuse would become much, much worse. Former members would say that they would be forced to work long hours serving in the church. Discipline was tightening. Members were required to attend long meetings without almost any sleep at all. They were criticized publicly if they were disobedient or didn't complete a task. Fear of punishment kept many in line. What began as unity slowly became deep control. Some members of the church began contacting politicians and other authorities about what was going on, including Congressman Leo Ryan. Ryan would eventually hire some private investigators where they would take a deep dive into the People's Temple to expose them as a radical religious group holding people against their will. Jones taught that the temple was under constant attack and that the government agencies and journalists were plotting to destroy them. This sense of danger bonded members together and justified his increasingly extreme leadership. Jim Jones's influence grew, and so did his paranoia. What started as a dream of equality was quietly turning into something far more dangerous. The foundation was already being laid. At the same time, Jones's health and mental state began to decline. He reportedly used prescription drugs and grew increasingly paranoid. He believed enemies were plotting against him constantly. Journalists asked questions and were labeled conspirators. Former members who spoke out were also called traitors. Jones's sermons began to shift again. It was no longer about building a better society in California. It was about surviving. He preached that the People's Temple was going to be under extreme attack by the U.S. government and that one day they would need to escape and protect themselves. He described that America was corrupt and dangerous and painted himself as the only one who could lead him to safety. He then gave the idea of relocation. Jones found a remote place in the land of Guyana, a small country in South America. It was isolated and surrounded by jungle and far from U.S. authorities. To Jones, it was a perfect place for refuge. He called it the new home, a promised land. He called it Jonestown. Members were told that they were going to build a paradise where everyone worked together, shared food, and lived in peace. They believed they were creating a better world, but in reality they were walking into isolation. The first groups that arrived in the mid-1970s cleared trees and built small cabins and planted crops. However, the conditions were harsh, the heat was intense, and medical care was very limited, including the supplies. Still, Jones insisted that this was freedom. Soon, more members began to follow, and back in the United States, the People's Temple began to empty. Families sold their possessions and moved to Jonestown. Children were brought with them, including elderly as well. Once there, communication with the outside world became restricted. Letters were monitored, phone calls were rare, and visitors were discouraged. More notably, when members would arrive in Guyana, they were asked to give up their passports and all of their travel documents that was held in the possession of Jones himself. He now had complete control over all of his members. Daily life in Jonestown revolved around work and obedience. People labored in the fields for long hours under the sun. Loud speakers played as Jones would give his daily sermons and speeches throughout the day and night. His voice was always present. Members were told that they were building history, but yet the cracks were beginning to form. Some people grew exhausted. Some became ill. Some wanted to leave. Jones reacted with fear and anger. He accused doubters of becoming traitors in Jonestown. The people that would eventually survive Jonestown spoke on frequent so-called loyalty tests that were done in all hours of the night, where an alarm system would go off and wake the members. Jones would grab his microphone and would have his members leave their bunks right away and head straight for the main pavilion area. They were ordered to drink a Kool-Aid-like substance where they were told they were going to fall into a deep sleep. Jones would tell them urgently that authorities were coming in helicopters and were going to bomb Jonestown. To prevent people, women, and children and elderly from dying and suffering, he ordered them to drink. And even on one account, according to some survivors, Jones even faked his own death, pretending to be shot by sniper fire in order for members to quickly take the potion. Of course, this is why they called it loyalty tests. By November of 1978, the People's Temple could no longer escape from outside attention. Families of the United States had begun demanding answers about loved ones who had moved to Jonestown. Former members described an environment of fear and control. Journalists published stories questioning Jim Jones's leadership. Pressure mounted for an official investigation. That pressure led to U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan to travel to Jonestown with a small group of reporters and concerned relatives. When Ryan arrived with the crew of NBC News, Jim Jones attempted to present Jonestown as a peaceful and successful community. Residents performed songs, meals were shared, smiles were encouraged, everything appeared orderly on the surface. But behind the scenes, tension began to fill the air. Some residents quietly slipped notes to Ryan and his team, and they were simple messages that read, "Please help us," or "We want to go home." For the first time, Jim Jones's authority was openly challenged in front of the outsiders. Several members asked to depart with Ryan. Jones tried to remain calm, but witnesses say he later appeared shaken. The image he had carefully constructed was beginning to crack. What happened next ended any chance of normal life in Jonestown. Ryan and his group were preparing to leave with those who had requested to go with them. As they were speaking with Jones and his leadership, a member of Jonestown attempted to stab Ryan in the heart, screaming out loud, "You wicked devil, you're trying to destroy our home." A scuffle broke out, and immediately Ryan and his group left Jonestown and headed for the local airstrip. What happened next would be known as one of the most evil mass murders to ever occur in cult history. Jones, knowing he was in trouble, told his guards that the time of revolution was now. Guards were sent to follow after Leo Ryan and the people awaiting an incoming plane that was running late. By the way, guys, I just want to give a quick disclosure. I'm going to be giving a quick transcript of the recording of Jim Jones. A lot of this is actually still on the internet, and I'm not going to show it on this video. However, if you choose to access it, you could simply just look it up on the internet. It's even on YouTube. However, I will warn you, it is very disturbing, and you could actually hear members of Jonestown actually perishing while this recording is going on. But here is a quick transcript of the mass suicide. Jones turned on his speaker and hit record and told all of his members, who he referred to as his children, to come to the main pavilion area for an important announcement. One by one, each member of Jonestown, who were busy doing their daily chores, arrived at the pavilion. Jones, who some say was under the influence of drugs, was eerily telling his followers that they have been betrayed and how hard he tried to give them a better life. He then described that the guards were now sent over to go kill the congressman, and the attackers were going to come and destroy everything that they had worked for. And while he was saying this, the medical staff around him were preparing a flavor-like substance mixed with cyanide. In the recording, a member could actually be heard debating with Jim Jones, asking if it was too late for them to relocate to another location like Russia. Of course, Jim Jones could be heard replying that it was too late, and the member could be heard debating with Jones on the children deserving to live. But he refuted her claim and said, "They deserve to live, but don't they deserve peace?" Members were then ordered to stand in a single file line, starting with the children, to intake the cyanide. Children and babies were given the poison by a medicine syringe, and adults were given a cup. One by one, the people would lie down on the fields and allow the cyanide to stop their heart. According to some survivors, not everybody was willing to cooperate. Some people had to actually be held down by guards, screaming as they were injected with the cyanide. Some members who would try to escape were shot dead. As this was all going on, another horrific event was going on as well. Congressman Leo Ryan, his crew, and members with their relatives were getting ready to board an awaiting plane. As they were boarding, a total of 5 guards of the People's Temple would arrive and began opening fire, instantly killing Congressman Leo Ryan and 4 other reporters and camera crew with NBC. Some people ran into the jungle and were shot and wounded, which included future U.S. Representative Jackie Speer. As the horror continued in Jonestown, people continued to take the cyanide one by one, including pets. And Jones could be heard speaking with authority and excitement that the congressman was dead. Disturbingly, children could be heard crying in pain, and older adults could be heard gagging and feeling the effects of the cyanide consuming their body. Some loyal members could be heard trying to calm the dying members that this was nothing to cry about. It was something that they could all rejoice about. They were going to a better place and didn't have to worry about being followed or tortured anymore. Some survivors in Jonestown were able to escape into the jungle or hide underneath cabins like Odell Rhodes or Tim Carter, who had to tragically watch his wife and 15-month-old son die in his arms as he was ordered to drop off $1 million in cash to the Soviet that Jim Jones owed. As the destruction would continue in Jonestown, it could be heard in the recording while each perished soul was surrounding Jim Jones on the fields. He could be heard saying with dead silence, "Free at last, free at last. This world was never our home. We didn't commit suicide. We committed a revolutionary act, protesting to the conditions of an inhumane world." Then dead silence fell for a while, and Jones put down his microphone and unalived himself with a semi-automatic handgun. The horrible nightmare was finally done. When authorities reached the settlement, they found a silent community where life once existed. The disturbing images of dead bodies spread out in Jonestown could be seen by news helicopters. The dream of equality and unity had ended in devastation. The news shocked the whole entire world. Television screens filled the images of a remote jungle compound. Reporters struggled to explain how a church could transform into a tragedy on this scale. The name Jonestown became a synopsis with blind obedience and manipulation. Jim Jones was also confirmed dead as well, but the story did not end there. In the aftermath, surviving members would be found in the jungle, and wounded victims of Ryan's party would be airlifted to the nearest hospital. Investigators were also able to find surviving members of Jonestown in a separate radio compound, which included Jones's son, Stephen Jones, and eventually get in contact with his other adopted children, including Jim Jones Jr. Investigators spent hours interviewing surviving members and relatives and uncovered years of warning signs: control through fear, isolation from family, public humiliation, paranoia about enemies. What began as a movement for justice had become a system of psychological imprisonment. Survivors would later describe how difficult it was to escape. Many had joined seeking the community for life and purpose. They stayed because leaving meant losing their family, their home, and their entire identity. Jonestown forced the world to confront a painful truth. Dangerous leaders do not always look dangerous at first. They often began as helpers, visionaries, and protectors. Jim Jones preached equality and compassion, but over time his need for power overshadowed everything else. He convinced people that he was the only one who could save them. And when that belief collapsed, so did the lives of those who trusted him. The phrase, "drink the Kool-Aid," entered a popular cultural phrase after Jonestown, and a lot of psychologists began using this as a term for cults recruiting and manipulating members to believe a false facade narrative. These were not mindless followers. These were parents, children, workers who had been manipulated through fear and devotion. Today, Jonestown stands as a warning. It teaches us how isolation can be used as control, how loyalty can replace critical thinking, how charisma can hide cruelty. The tragedy also reshaped how society views cults. Governments became more aware of dangerous groups. Families learned the importance of staying connected to loved ones inside of extreme organizations. But most importantly, Jonestown reminds us that no leader should ever be above questioning. Today, the memorial of the People's Temple stands in Oakland, California. The People's Temple began as a promise for a better world. However, it ended as one of the most darkest chapters in modern history. Jim Jones became a symbol, not of faith, but of what happens when one man's need for power goes unchecked. And this is why it is on Destructive Stories. Thanks for watching.